So we did that for 10 years and loved every minute of it. But it was towards the end of those 10 years, one morning I woke up and I'm not a morning person. It was a Sunday morning, and so I wandered into the shower trying to wake up, get cleaned up, and all of a sudden my wife started banging on the door. James, James, come out quick. And being high school boarding home dad, I'm like, okay, what in the world happened? We've got these 20 high schoolers, so I'm imagining a fight or somebody got hurt or something, because my wife was obviously stressed. And so I'm soaking wet. I just grab my bathrobe, throw it on, dripping wet. The floors were like a ceramic tile floors, so I didn't have to worry about doing damage. So I'm slipping and sliding, coming out. I open the door into our living room, and there at the window is a soldier, a man in camo gear with a it was actually an AK-47, automatic weapon that he was holding and aiming it at me and yelling at me, we're the police, come out right now. Well, I could see other soldiers running, and as I looked, I could see, wait a minute, they all have different uniforms, mismatched uniforms. They're wearing rubber boots, which was immediately a sign that, okay, these are not government forces. These are rebels, insurgents. And so it was obvious we were under attack. And so when somebody's pointing a gun at you, you got to do what they say. And so I went out to him, and immediately he started asking me, where's your pilots? Where's your airplane? Because we had our flight base for our mission there. And so I thought, oh man, these guys want to take our plane. They want to kidnap the pilots. So I could hear our alarm system going off. It was a series of rings on our phone. It wouldn't sound like an alarm, but for everybody on our compound, they would have known we're under attack. Hide, grab your backpack and escape into the jungle if you can, or hide. But be aware that there's hostiles on the premises. And so I thought, well, if I can stall, it'll maybe give our pilots a chance to get away, and because they were clear at the other end of the property. So I pretended like I was an American who didn't speak Spanish, and I just acted like I didn't understand what he was asking me, and just kind of played dumb. And after a while going back and forth, he finally got frustrated and just, come with me, and got behind me and started pushing me out into this open field where they had another one of our missionaries, a man by the name of Steve Welsh, and a partner of mine, partner in ministry. And Steve, obviously, he had just gotten up too. He was actually in his boxer shorts and didn't have a shirt on. He was maybe he did have a t-shirt. I can't remember, but he was on his knees and had his hands tied up behind his back. And there was a rope going from his hands up around his neck, so he had to keep his hands up like this. If he lowered his arms, it would choke him. And I remember walking up to him, and there was a man standing there with a pistol to his forehead. And I remember as I walked up with the guy behind me, I remember thinking, this is it. They're going to kill us. They want to kill 2 Americans, and they're going to do it right here. They were videotaping. One of the soldiers was videotaping with a camera. And I remember thinking, wow, my family's going to watch their dad, their husband get martyred right here, in front of them. But after a few tense moments of standing there with a gun in my back and the man holding the pistol to Steve's head, the guy holding the pistol looked at me and he goes, do you speak Spanish? That was what he asked me. Do you speak Spanish? I said, yeah, I do speak Spanish, thinking maybe the guy behind me would hit me or shoot me or whatever, but nothing happened. And so he started talking to me. He says, well, he said, we don't want to hurt anybody. We're going to be taking you two men hostage. We're kidnapping you. And so, I never thought I would be happy to hear that I'm going to be kidnapped, but at that point, I thought they were going to kill us. So it was actually a relief to hear that they were planning to kidnap us. And, because kidnapping, while not good, at least maybe I would, get away or get freed or whatever. But they took me over to where this racquetball court was, where everybody was inside, and they had me go in, and they gave me this big propaganda spill and wanted me to translate their words to our missionaries. Many of our missionaries did speak Spanish, but there were quite a few that didn't, because they were there just temporarily to help teach or whatever. So honestly, if they could have heard my translations, they probably would have shot me on the spot, because the stuff they were asking me to say was just ridiculous. I just couldn't even say all of it, but definitely propaganda, hateful, stuff. So they took me out of there, and it was obvious they were getting ready to take us away. And all of a sudden I look up, and my wife is pushing past the guard guarding the door. Now, my wife was 7 months pregnant at the time, and she's a little blonde, petite thing, and she carries her babies right out in front, and so she was very large. And so I guess she figured, in hearing her side of the story, she's figured, well, they're taking my husband. I may never see him again. I'm going to try to go out and be with him. And so she figured, what's the worst they can do? Not let me go out, So she just pushed hard on the door and kind of pushed the guard to the side. And he let her come out. And she came out and was with me. And we were just there talking. And, it was an emotional time. Neither of us were crying or anything, but she was so emotional she couldn't use her voice. All she could do was whisper. And so I remember she was standing there hugging me and close to me, saying, I love you. However long this takes, just know I'll be waiting for you. I'll be here, And so eventually they're getting ready to, take me away. And all of a sudden the leader, the dude who had the pistol, who had held it to my friend's head, he sees my wife hugging me and turns to the soldier and goes, is that his wife? And they're like, yeah. And he says, well, don't take him, get somebody else. She's pregnant. So they go back into the racquetball court, and they come out with another friend of mine, a man by the name of Tim Van Dyke. And it was hard. I mean, Tim was like, what's going on? And I said, Tim, they're taking you instead of me because Diane's pregnant. When I told him what was happening, he said, okay, just could you get my Bible? Could you ask them if I could get my Bible? And so that's what Tim wanted. He wanted his Bible. And so one of our Columbian men was listening, and he was listening from inside the racquetball court, and he goes, I'll go get it. And he took off running for the house. I thought they might shoot him, but they didn't. And he ran off to Tim's house, and they took Tim away. I'll never forget that feeling of seeing him marched off. They put him in the Jeep along with Tim, and all the soldiers piled on, and they had two of our vehicles that they had loaded up, and they drove off. And I'll never forget, they're driving down the road, and the soldiers are waving at us and laughing and saying, goodbye, goodbye, as they drove off with my two friends. And it was just this horrible feeling of, man, will I ever see them again? Tim and Steve's families were evacuated that same day. We flew them out. And then all the rest of us, the military did show up later that day, and then the rest of us were evacuated the next day, the following day. They set up a perimeter around our school that night to protect us, and then we all left and had to evacuate. And over the next year and a half, we would get reports that Tim and Steve had been sighted, they were alive, we'd gotten proof of life. Our mission was trying to bring about their free release. Unfortunately, about a year and a half after they were taken, and we were so hopeful, I got a phone call one night, and it was one of our field leaders, and he said, James, I have some bad news. And what's going on? And he said, Tim and Steve are dead. We're like, what? Are you sure? He said, yeah, Danny went down and identified the bodies. They're gone. They were shot and killed. And I remember I couldn't believe it actually was real. And I remember just like, no. My wife's like, well, what are they saying? What's going on? I said, they said Tim and Steve were killed. And so my wife turns on the TV because it was about time for the national news to come on, and we thought maybe there would be some on, and sure enough, they didn't even give credits or the intro. It just, news flash, and there on the screen were images of our two friends laid out, in the morgue. And you could see they had been shot multiple times. And I remember just sitting on the bed, my wife and I just weeping, crying, and just this horrible conflict of emotions. On the one hand, feeling relief that we were still together, that should have been me. But then feeling guilty for feeling that way and feeling that relief that we were still together, and just this awful sense of guilt and despair. And then over time, I began to get, over the next few days, I began to get really bitter and angry and just questioning God. And what in the world, Lord? These are your servants. These are your missionaries. How could you allow them to come to such a brutal end? And it just didn't make any sense to me. So God had to do a work in my heart, and He did. He had prearranged for me I was supposed to be preaching in this English-speaking Baptist church, Southern Baptist church in Bogota, full of North American business people and British business people. And so the pastor called me up and said, James, I heard what happened. You don't have to preach this Sunday. And I was like, and I don't know why I said this, because the last thing I wanted to do, I hadn't even opened my Bible. I was so angry. And I just felt this overwhelming need to say yes, that I need to do this. And so I told him, I said, no, I think I should do this. But it forced me to get into God's Word and study. And man, He just broke my heart through His Word about, I was questioning God's love, and He just kept showing me passage after passage after passage about God's love for us. Ultimately, the verse that just broke my heart was John 15:13, that says, no greater love has anyone than this, that He laid down His life for a friend. And it just struck me. I said, who am I to question God's love? He's already demonstrated His love in the most perfect, complete fashion that anybody can show love to another by giving their life. And God used that to really break my heart and get I still had questions. Lord, I don't understand. I'm claiming Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good, but I don't see anything good that could possibly come out of this. But by faith, I just said, I'm just going to trust that somehow you are going to do that. And over the years, we've seen many things that God, how He was able to use that. Steve's two sons immediately said, the rebels, they killed our father, but all they did is duplicate him because we're going to both be missionaries. And so that was an immediate illustration of God, but of God at work. But many other people were challenged, and their hearts and lives were touched. I don't know how many people, because of Tim and Steve's story, gave their life, like Steve's sons did, to serve, in missions. So God began it to work right away. We know that. The other thing that hit me over time too is God took two missionaries and put them with an unreached people group, the rebels, where no missionary would have ever gone. And for a year and a half, those people, those men guarding my two friends would have been hearing. Tim had his Bible. My friend Alberto, who said, I'll go get his Bible, he was able to get Tim's Bible and hand it to him as they were driving off. And so they had God's word. And I know those two men, they were both outspoken. Tim loved studying the Bible and loved teaching. And Steve was a very, very loved to share the gospel with the neighbors and people in the community and everything. So those rebels had no idea what they were in for when they kidnapped those two men. So that is another way that I began to see, okay, God, you could use them in the lives of these rebels too. You died for all men, not just, a certain select few. You died for everyone, even these rebels, even these insurgents.